Breaking news out of Washington, and what we're uncovering here is nothing short of catastrophic for American workers. New economic data reveals that despite all the White House victory laps about wage growth, real wages for the vast majority of Americans have been declining throughout 2025. We're talking about 80% of workers seeing their purchasing power shrink while costs continue to climb. In the next 14 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what's happening to your paycheck, who's actually profiting from this economy, and why top economists are sounding the alarm about what's coming next. The question everyone's asking, how did an administration promising the greatest economy in history deliver wage stagnation for nearly everyone? Let's get into it. Here's what's actually happening in Trump's economy right now. According to the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics data released just last month, real average hourly earnings increased only 0.8% from November 2024 to November 2025. That sounds okay until you dig into what's really going on beneath the surface. The American Progress Foundation just published a comprehensive analysis showing that while wages were growing at 2.1% annually when Trump took office in January 2025, that growth rate has steadily declined throughout the year, particularly for workers without college degrees. And it gets worse. The Tax Foundation calculated that Trump's tariffs alone amount to an average tax increase of $1,200 per household in 2025. Think about that. While the White House claims your wages are up, you're simultaneously paying an extra $1,000 a year because of trade policy. The net result? The vast majority of American families are falling behind. Here's a concrete example of what this looks like on the ground. Sarah Martinez, a single mother working as a pharmacy technician in Phoenix, Arizona, told reporters last month that even though her hourly wage went from $19.50 to $20.25 this year, a 3.8% nominal increase, she's actually worse off than she was 12 months ago. Her grocery bill has increased by $180 per month. Her rent went up $150. Her car insurance jumped 22%. When you add it all up, that raise she got, it doesn't even cover half of her increased costs. And Sarah's story isn't unique. It's the reality for tens of millions of American workers right now. What we're witnessing is a massive disconnect between the economic messaging coming from the White House and the lived reality of working Americans. While corporate executives celebrate record profit margins and wealthy investors see their portfolios surge to all-time highs, the people who actually make this economy function are watching their financial security evaporate. The question is, how did we get here? And more importantly, where is this headed? Let me walk you through the mechanics of what's destroying purchasing power for American workers, because understanding this is critical. There are three simultaneous forces crushing middle-class and working-class families right now. First, there's the tariff effect. When Trump imposed sweeping tariffs throughout 2025, 25% on steel and aluminum, 20% on Chinese imports, additional levies on European goods, he claimed foreign countries would pay the price. That's not how tariffs work. Think of it like this. When you impose a 25% tariff on imported goods, American companies importing those products pay that 25% to the US Treasury. Then, to maintain their profit margins, they pass those costs directly to consumers. The St. Louis Federal Reserve published research in October showing that tariff measures are exerting measurable upward pressure on consumer prices. Translation, you're paying more for everything from cars to clothing to home appliances. Second, we have wage growth deceleration. Here's what the data shows. In January 2025, real wages for all workers were growing at a healthy 2.1% annually. By November, that growth had slowed considerably. But here's the kicker. That slowdown hit workers without college degrees the hardest. The people who can least afford to lose ground are losing it fastest. Meanwhile, according to New York's Fiscal Policy Institute, wages for top earners grew 8% in the first quarter of 2025. The inequality gap isn't just continuing, it's accelerating. Third, there's what economists call the inflation persistence effect. Even though headline inflation numbers have moderated from their peaks, prices for essential goods remain stubbornly elevated. Reuters' economic tracking shows that while inflation technically slowed, the cumulative price increases from previous years mean families are still operating in a fundamentally more expensive environment. Your wages might grow 2%, but if prices already increased 15% over the past few years and stay there, you're permanently behind. Let's compare this to a historical precedent. During the 1970s stagflation period, we saw a similar pattern: wage growth that couldn't keep pace with rising costs, creating a squeeze on household budgets that lasted for years. The difference? Back then, policymakers eventually recognized the problem and implemented comprehensive reforms. Right now, the Trump administration is doubling down on the very policies making things worse. Here's the direct cause and effect chain. Tariffs increase import costs, companies raise consumer prices, real wages decline relative to costs, families reduce spending, economic growth slows, companies freeze hiring and wages. The cycle reinforces itself. Goldman Sachs elevated their recession probability to 35% in March, specifically because of this dynamic. When JP Morgan Chase warned that Trump's policies could reduce GDP by 1.3% by 2028, this is the mechanism they're worried about. And here's what really concerns analysts. This isn't a temporary adjustment period. The Yale Budget Lab published research showing that tariffs, like all indirect taxes, permanently reduce the purchasing power of household incomes by increasing prices throughout the economy. Unless these policies change dramatically, what we're seeing now is the new normal, an economy where wages nominally increase, but purchasing power steadily erodes, creating a permanent underclass of Americans working harder for less. Now let's break down exactly who's being hit by this economic squeeze and how bad it really is, because the impacts vary dramatically depending on where you sit in the income distribution. For American workers and families in the bottom 80% of earners, the situation is dire. A family in Michigan earning $65,000 a year, right around the median household income, is now paying approximately $3,400 more annually for the same basket of goods and services they bought in 2024. That's the combination of persistent inflation, tariff pass-through costs, and increased healthcare and housing expenses. But their wages only increased about $1,800 over the same period. That's a $1,600 annual deficit. For a family already living paycheck to paycheck, that gap is devastating. It means maxing out credit cards, skipping medical appointments, or falling behind on utility bills. The Brookings Institution just published shocking data showing that in every major metro area they studied, at least 20% of middle-class earners can no longer afford to live in their own communities after adjusting for local costs. Think about that. 1 in 5 middle-class families effectively priced out of middle-class life. Small businesses are caught in an impossible bind. Take restaurant owner Marcus Chen in Seattle. His food costs increased 18% this year due to tariffs on imported ingredients and higher domestic prices. His labor costs went up 12% because workers demanded raises to offset their own rising expenses. But when he tried to pass those costs to customers through menu price increases, foot traffic dropped 22%. He's now operating at a loss, burning through savings, facing a choice between laying off staff or closing entirely. And here's the thing, Marcus's story is playing out in thousands of small businesses nationwide. Large corporations, on the other hand, they're doing just fine. Corporate profit margins hit near record levels in Q3 2025. Companies like Walmart, Target, and major manufacturers successfully passed tariff costs to consumers while maintaining profitability. Stock markets reached all-time highs. Wealthy investors saw their portfolios surge. The economic pain is not being distributed equally. It's being concentrated on people least able to bear it. Internationally, trading partners are responding with their own retaliatory measures. The European Union implemented counter tariffs on American agricultural products, devastating farmers in the Midwest. China reduced imports of U.S. soybeans and pork, crushing entire sectors of American agriculture. The American Farm Bureau reported that farm income is projected to drop 15% in 2025, the steepest decline since the 1980s farm crisis. And here's what economists are warning about. The ripple effects are just beginning. The construction sector is getting hammered by tariffs on Canadian lumber and Chinese steel, with the American Progress Center calculating that these policies could result in 450,000 fewer new homes built through 2030. That's 450,000 construction jobs that won't exist, 450,000 families who won't find affordable housing, exacerbating the already severe housing shortage. Corporate executives are now telling investors to expect price increases in January 2026 as pre-tariff inventory runs out and holiday discounts end. Politico reported that retail CEOs are warning there's only so long they can absorb costs before passing them fully to consumers. Translation: if you think prices are bad now, experts are saying this is just the warm-up act. The main event is coming. Now let's talk about what leading economists and legal experts are saying about this crisis, because the warnings are becoming impossible to ignore. CNBC's recent survey of top economists characterized Trump's trade policy as creating an economy of chaos and confusion. The University of Chicago's Booth School surveyed dozens of leading economists, and the consensus was stark. These policies are causing measurable economic damage with few offsetting benefits. As one economist put it, we're implementing 1930s era trade policy in a 21st century global economy. It's economic malpractice. Goldman Sachs chief economist John Hatzius warned clients in March that recession probability had jumped from 20% to 35% specifically due to the escalating trade war. Think about that. Wall Street's most influential bank telling investors there's now better than a 1 in 3 chance of recession, directly attributing that risk to administration policy. But here's what really concerns analysts: the political consequences of acknowledging reality. The White House response to deteriorating economic conditions has been to double down on messaging that contradicts lived experience. Just last week, administration officials claimed real wages are on track to rise by 4.2% in the first full year, a figure that doesn't match Bureau of Labor Statistics data or independent analysis. When NBC News fact-checked these claims, they found significant discrepancies between administration statements and economic reality. Congressional reaction has been muted and largely partisan. Republican leadership has largely defended the tariff strategy, arguing short-term pain will lead to long-term gains through reshoring manufacturing. Democrats have hammered the administration's policies, but lack sufficient votes to force changes. The result is policy paralysis while families suffer. Public sentiment is shifting dramatically. A recent ABC News poll found that 61% of Americans now rate the economy as poor or not so good, up from 48% in January. More concerning for the administration, independents and even some Republican voters are expressing serious doubts about economic management. What happens in the next 30 to 90 days? Economists predict we'll see several key indicators. First, holiday retail sales data will reveal whether consumer spending is holding up or cracking under pressure. Early indicators suggest spending is weakening. Second, January will bring the first wave of post-inventory price increases as companies exhaust stockpiles bought before tariffs fully hit. Third, we'll see whether the labor market continues adding jobs or begins shedding them as small businesses fail and larger companies freeze hiring. Looking 6 to 12 months out, here's the medium-term scenario that has experts worried. If current policies continue unchanged, we could see a wage price spiral in reverse, where declining purchasing power forces reduced consumer spending, triggering layoffs, further reducing demand, and pushing the economy into recession. The UCLA Anderson School of Economics specifically warned that Trump's policies could lead to recession by reducing workforce participation and manufacturing output. Let me bring this back to the 3 critical points you need to remember. First, Real wages for 80% of American workers are declining when you account for tariff costs and persistent inflation. That $200 per household tariff tax is real, and it's coming out of your pocket. Second, the economic pain is being distributed unequally, with working class and middle class families bearing the burden while corporations and wealthy investors profit. Third, leading economists are warning that without major policy changes, we're headed toward potential recession in 2026, and the warning signs are already flashing red. The fundamental question facing this economy is whether policymakers will acknowledge what's happening to ordinary families and change course, or continue down this path until the economic damage becomes catastrophic. What do you think happens next? Will this administration reverse course when recession risks become undeniable, or will they double down and blame external factors? How long can families sustain these losses before we see real social and political consequences? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how these economic conditions are affecting you personally. If you want to stay informed on the economic stories that mainstream media often glosses over, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the next breakdown. We're going to keep following this story as it develops because your financial future depends on understanding what's really happening in this economy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.